Rated T for Teen.
Enough talk. Let's fight. Open the gates.
Like a pancake.
Murder and seduce. That's what I do best.
Apocalypse awaken.
Onward to victory!
Look at that.
The almighty button.
A button.
The one that brings power to those who is able to claim it. Welcome in to the SMITE 2 Dev Insight for Alpha Weekend number 2. Going to be coming up shortly, just later today. We're going to have the servers going live. You can jump in, test out all the new great features and new things to come here in Alpha Weekend 2. I'm Jimek. I got Ajax and Clumsy joining me here on the couch as we get ready to jump into the Insight. So you got a lot of new stuff, a lot of changes, a lot of bug fixes as well coming from SMITE 1, because we had a ton of reports that came in for bug, general feedback. We've been looking over everything that you guys have been saying, and it's been able to help us build an even better Alpha Weekend for you guys coming here into the second weekend.
Oh, yeah. Very exciting.
And I think probably the big highlight that comes from this one is the 2 new gods that came out with this one. We got Soul and Hades now joining the battleground. So for those of you who are familiar with those gods, you'll probably be able to play those ones. No problem. It'll be a lot of similarities. But there's also a couple of new big ones. And I think at least out of those 2, probably Hades the biggest of the change-ups there, especially regarding around the ultimate. A lot of changes came that way, AJ.
That new ult is super exciting. We've been looking forward to debuting that one for a long time. And I saw a lot of hype in the comments in the chat across social media for it yesterday. People who were like, I'm a Hades main again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of people that said like, oh, I haven't really been inspired to check out Hades, but now with SMITE 2 and these changes, I might just give him a try. And that's exactly what we're going for, is we want to breathe new life into these gods, even if it is the god of the underworld, and and give it a try.
Good one, good one.
Yeah, I think it's going to be real fun jumping in there for the Alpha Weekend. Again, that's going to be going, server's going to be going live a little bit later today, so that way you guys can jump in and play throughout the course of the weekend. There's going to be the big tournament that's also going to be popping up on Saturday, and I know that the dev team, the fans, the players, we're all going to be excited to watch this tournament kind of unfold itself and whatnot. But here on the Dev Insight, we ask you guys over on Reddit to provide some questions for the devs, the way we can ask them, and then give you a little bit more insight. Hey, that's the fun of the name, Dev Insight. And we've got our first question ready to go that you guys can at least to throw out the ask there, which is, will we ever see, either in the near or distant future, the return of things like starters and blessing items in some shape or form, especially with parts of the community missing them, notably for the support role and things like that? So kind of just the TLDR on this one is starters and blessings. There's been a lot of rumbles about those. What is the kind of the thoughts for you guys on those items, maybe making a return or maybe some kind of incarnation of them?
I think the short answer is yes. We'll probably see these in some form at some time, but I wouldn't say that we are hurrying to return them, and I wouldn't say that we want to bring them back in the same way that SMITE 1 did.
Yeah.
Right? So even SMITE 1 had multiple iterations of these. Like the commenter even called that out, which is cool. So we had old school starter items, then we had blessings, then we had the return of old school starter items with a lot of significant changes, and then we had shards and recipes. Like, we've had a lot of different types of thing that can kind of fit here. And it's probably someplace we'll explore to in SMITE 2 in the future. I'd say the reason around not rushing it is that we've spoken to this a little bit on the first patch show, but just to rephrase a little bit, is that starter items in a way could be contradictory to our current SMITE 2 goals of flexibility and creativity. So as much as the starter items might be beloved or exciting or interesting, they are generally very powerful and very linear. So like, if you don't buy this item and play this role, you're trolling.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
And that kind of be counterproductive. Like, even the support ones, you might say that support misses that bonus gold, but that's because the game was designed around support needing that. And if you didn't do that, you were just putting yourself at a massive disadvantage, and that just didn't give supports much opportunity to try other things.
Yeah.
So kind of the beauty of not having that in SMITE 2 is like, maybe supports in SMITE 2 are just better with an axe or a gem as their first item, and just getting more lane pressure and actually dealing a little bit more damage and being, maybe they're better off being a second jungler.
Yeah, and
SMITE 2.
And that's exactly what I think. That's
the beauty of it.
Is we don't want to just pigeonhole gods and roles, and we're moving away from the classes. And we were talking even from the first kind of alpha weekend and from the founders test before that, we're already seeing a lot of different ideas emerge, right? And we don't want to just say, hey, dual lane and the expectations from SMITE 1 need to maintain and be there for SMITE 2. For some of those we'll play around with, some of those are totally okay, but who's to say that you need to do the classic like dual lane jungler, mid lane, solo lane? Like,
right.
What if it is the second support sometimes goes to roam, invades a bit more? We don't have Invader's Curse in some something like that. Infamy is a system that's built in. Maybe the support becomes more of a second jungler, or maybe you start having, we were playing around with like, okay, what if your solo laner is actually more like your carry, and they have more of the attack damage, and they're getting a lot of farm solo there, and like there's a lot of different ideas that we can explore around with that we want to let the player shape the game for us in a way before we start dictating how we expect players to play the game.
The opportunity is big.
Yes.
Right. There's a lot of cool things that players could explore into. There's chances to start anew, like try things that weren't tryable.
Yeah, 100%.
We would be thrilled to see that, in this first Alpha 2 tournament, we see some unique team comps and some unique strategies, like a solo carry or things like that, like physical or melee carries, right, which are popular in other MOBAs. The starter system in many ways restricted a lot of that. So kind of like trying to keep that open-ended for now. Now, the reasons we would go to make these items in the future would be we find starter items could help encourage that in some ways.
It really could.
Like, this is not really a great example. But one thing come to mind is, you remember that short stint of time where Boombas was like a cheap separate starter item?
Yeah.
And everybody, all 10 players could get Boombas. And a starter item, I think, or they just did get Boombas in a tier 1.
It was just that efficient.
Good. So like everybody was a jungler. That's not ideal, but like being able to get like
it has
cheaper,
a different level of flexibility in that way, right? If everyone's got it, then it's not.
So we could want to use starters to actually help continue to push our goals of flexibility in Smite 2. The other thing is novelty.
Yeah.
So like at a certain point, like in Smite 1, we got a lot of groundwork and building the game for the first few years, and then it was kind of refining core systems for the first few years, and then towards the last few years, most recent few years of Smite, we were just intentionally breaking design rules because it was 100%. Fun.
Yeah, exactly.
for players and for us.
What can we do? Things that we wouldn't do usually. Totally.
Right. So that's where the novelty factor comes in. And at Smite 2, if it starts to feel like stable and we want to destabilize things to create more theory crafting, more inventive things, starter items could be a way of doing it.
Yep. Starter items also like tend to have a little bit of, a higher power efficiency available to them, right? So that's something that we need to think about too. We wanted to make sure that the early game of Smite 2 isn't something that's immediately disrupted by just having a lot of strength, whether that's even defensive strength or offensive strength, because those are still different ways of being powerful. So that's really important too. Just let's make sure that everyone's kind of on a more level playing ground so we can see what emerges out of that.
And I think we're underestimating the value that this alpha tournament is going to show us today, this weekend, because I think there are a lot of ways, like, I see people in the chat talking about support identity and things like that. And yeah, part of the downside of flexibility is that is in some ways antithetical to identity. But I think when we start seeing people actually playing to win, trying to win, there's stakes on the line. And we start seeing the content creation and the esports viewership loop that goes with that. That's what dictates the meta more so than our design tools ever. I mean, I think often we design things for specific purposes, or design things for specific to solve specific problems. But what ends up being what the pro players pick to win is what actually defines things. So if once, I think we're going to have a much better idea of, we intentionally try to give an open canvas, a lot of options for Smite 2's early stages. But just from this weekend, we're going to see what is the winning team of this tournament? How is their support playing? And everybody's going to say that's support's identity.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
That's what their identity is. And some people are going to be like, that's cool, I like that identity. And some people might not like that.
Yeah.
And then, we might see multiple options still. Maybe the second place team does something very different, but it was still close to winning. So we're going to learn a lot, and we're going to be adjusting, with the community on that.
And there's still a lot of time to be taken here, right? Like, we're on our second alpha weekend. Even if the supports, like, let's say even all the supports tomorrow or on for the tournament do the exact same thing, it's like that doesn't mean that's what the meta is going to be next weekend release or for like next year when the game comes out, whatever it is, right? Like, there's so much time to be taken here. There's a lot of changes. You guys saw how much change we put in even from the last alpha weekend test to this one. There's a lot we can play around with.
We're rapidly trying to approach where Smite 2 becomes the most complete version of itself.
Right.
But as a complete version of itself is intended to be a live service game.
Yep, exactly.
Those constantly change and evolve over time.
Yeah, I mean that's the beauty that even Smite 1 over its lifetime had is you look at what Smite 1 started at, what in its early alpha stages, even to its more kind of closed beta and then open beta and then eventually launched. I mean the game evolved so drastically, and even kind of going back on the conversation of starters, those also changed drastically over the lifetime. Where it was originally a 500 to 700 gold item, you pick it up and then you sell it like 3-4 items in the build. Eventually those now became into the blessings where you hold on to them until level 20 and then you get rid of them at that point. Then they came back and now you keep that starter all the way through because now boots are gone and the starter kind of has replaced boots in that instance and has kind of evolved into its own unique and powerful item. So I think the big thing to take away is that there's just a lot of experimenting to kind of go on from here. That we're super early in the stages of Smite 2. Again, this is closed alpha stage number 2 at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
And even calling it closed alpha stage 2, I mean, there's still so much more to be had there. This is just the first taste out there. So there's a lot of experimenting, a lot of changes that will be happening. I mean, even if you look over the patch notes just from Smite 1 or from Smite 2 Alpha 1 into 2, there was a lot of adjustments and a lot of community feedback and sentiment that came in to allow for a lot of changes. And I think that's the most important thing and really something that Hi-Rez and Titanforge has embodied in a lot of their games is changing a lot of things, trying a whole bunch of new stuff, seeing what sticks, seeing what the people like, and eventually trying to build off of that and kind of build something in there. So I think that's kind of the big takeaway from this is it's not a no, it's not a yes, it's a maybe. We'll kind of see where the road takes us at that point. So I think we can get ready and maybe load up our second question from the fans out there. Now, all these were pulled over from our Reddit. We had a Reddit poll go up yesterday after the Insight show. Our next one was talking about the Hades remodel, asking why it wasn't remodeled or what is determined for a god to need some form of remodel coming into Smite 2.
Yeah, good question. We saw this one discussed a lot, so we wanted to make sure we covered it today. So Hades was not remodeled because he's our Hades.
Yep.
Our Hades is our Hades, and he's got a unique look to him that differentiates him from Hades you may have seen in a lot of other products. And also a look to him that people are they're used to, they're attached to. Hades has a lot of big fans in the Smite community. He's a very popular god. He's a very unique gameplay. But just his visual style, we didn't want to change that. There's so much that we love about it. It may not be the most lore accurate version of the character,
Whatever lore that
I
may be,
suppose.
yeah.
Which depending on your mythology, your interpretations of the mythology. So Hades was not remodeled because we like Hades, we like the way he looks. We wanted to preserve his core visual themes. There are no plans to remodel him in the future. That's one thing we saw in the comments a lot. We saw a lot of people saying oh, well, maybe they're not remodeling the god now and they'll do it later. But no, it would make the most sense to do it now if we wanted to do it.
Yeah, there's always things that we are tweaking, we talked about with its soul materials and stuff that people saw, but in this case, Hades' model is going to be staying the same.
So, how do you determine what god needs a remodel before joining Smite 2? So that's a good question as well. I spoke to it a little bit before, but most of the gods are going to get touch-ups, not full remodels, because of the same reasons we're listing out here already. A lot of the reasons we designed a god is very intentional. There's lots of things people already like about that god. Yep. So we want to keep the god's identity intact. We don't really intend to remodel gods for lore reasons pretty much ever. If a Smite character was intentionally modeled in a way that's not traditional to their lore, that was intentional the first time.
Right.
And still intentional. We're not going to change Scylla to a giant whale or serpent or whatever, giant sea creature.
Yep.
Because that's more accurate. Whatever, she was specifically done in a unique way the first time on purpose.
Like you said, it's Smite Scylla.
Right. So in most cases, gods are getting touch-ups, cleanups, adjustments maybe to their armor, their clothing, their proportions, their model. Onher was another one that's been adjusted pretty heavily in Smite 2. He was just super old. Yeah. So what determines if a god needs a remodel? Mostly if the god is one of the oldest Smite 1 gods that never got a remodel in Smite 1, they'll probably need one for various reasons that are not related to their intentional artistic design. They're just old. They might have really, strange proportions. There's some other issues behind the scenes that y'all don't even know about. Some of our old characters are really tough to work with. Because of the way they're developed. So fixing a lot of that stuff, fixing the model there. We might do remodels to touch up little bits and pieces of armor, clothing, proportion, size changes, that type of thing. And very few gods are getting a total remodel. I can only really think of one that's coming up in the future. That's a pretty hefty remodel. But also, like, depending on how players see things is different from how devs see things. Like, Neith got pretty significant clothing
Yes, that's
and
true.
rig and animation changes in Smite 2, but she generally still looks like Neith, and that was very intentional too. So there's a lot more gray area in this space than the simple like remodel or not type of discussion.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and even when you think about some of the older gods in Smite 1, nearly all of them, and I say nearly because, as you mentioned, On Her's one that, wasn't quite up to date, but you look back to the older gods, like Bacchus has seen significant changes over his lifetime.
Yep.
Artemis has gotten recent remodels.
Athena got a
and
total
changes.
remodel.
Sobex,
Athena,
love that.
Sobek. So many of these older gods have already gotten those to where now probably porting them over to Smite 2 is just some small minor adjustments, as you said, like
Right.
proportions or rigs and things like that to kind of just fine tune them a little bit more. So it's just something to kind of keep an eye on, as everything's going to be touched up just a little bit. Nothing is going to look exactly the same from Smite 1 into Smite 2. Some might be a bit more drastic. Some might be a little bit more subtle that you really kind of got to look after. And some of it might just legitimately just be texturing and lighting where they just look a little bit nicer because of the new engine that pops in.
Definitely a lot of texture material work on every new god. A lot. And a lot of behind the scenes rigging and animation touch-ups on every god. And I just want to point out to this conversation too, to thank the community for talking about this, because we were in this thread, we were reading it, we were seeing the feedback about not just Hades, but people discussing other gods. I shared that feedback with our art director, and we've already looked into, like, when we're doing our touch-ups, who does the community think needs touch-ups more than others, right? As opposed to remodel. Think about maybe, you out there who want to continue participating in this conversation with us. Think about who needs more touch-ups than less touch-ups. Who, like, what would you specifically like to see touched up? I got a lot of good feedback from these Hades threads, and I jotted that down and talked over it with
That's
Ben,
fantastic.
and we've already got some concepts for gods in the distant future
Nice.
that we used this feedback to help plan for.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the fun things about working, with this company is we're all on social media. We're looking at Twitter, we're looking at Reddit, we're looking on YouTube comments, wherever it may be, that we're putting some form of content
Oh, yeah,
out there.
we are.
We're
much
reading
sometimes.
we're reading through a lot of those, and we're getting that feedback, we're writing it down, we're sharing it throughout the department. So we're seeing what you guys are saying. It's not like you guys are speaking out into a void, even if we might not immediately respond to it in a situation or in a setting kind of like this one. We are reading a lot of that feedback. We're seeing what you guys are saying and what to
Yeah,
kind
we've
of
got your chat right here too. So
Yeah, if
yeah,
that's
like,
it.
like
You're
you
wondering
guys are
where we're
literally
looking
on
at.
our pads.
if you see us glancing down, that's why we're reading it. We see it, and like we see it when you talk smack about us on Reddit. You see that too. You see that too.
When we go to bed at night, we just have this screen like above us when we're just staring at it. It's like, oh, there we go.
Just a little
they're saying
project-
hi to us now too.
Yeah, it's just like a little projector pushing up to our ceiling. Just got chatter or Reddit
Yeah,
or something like that
exactly.
kind of popping through. But
Good question here. I definitely understand the discussion on Hades, and keep having the discussions. And as much as possible, I think the community does a really good job of like listening to these insights and kind of how we frame the questions and frame the situations, and like instead of the remodel conversation, have that touch-up conversation.
Yes.
And we want to hear about it.
Yeah.
Let us know.
yeah, I mean, if there's any kind of conversations you guys think that might be interesting for the devs to kind of look into, throw that out there on the Reddit. They're browsing through it. We do the r/Smite usually on Fridays as well to also kind of browse through there, and especially once a Smite 2 Alpha weekend is done, it's almost entirely Smite 2. So I'm sure these guys are looking through that VOD, seeing what's being popped up, going through the Reddit there as well. But we can go ahead and move on to our next question, loaded up here for the Dev Insight Show, which is, how do you plan on handling or balancing the beads or die characters like Ares or Daji, or characters that have executes without something like Aegis in the game?
Yeah, it's a good question.
It's pick some spicy ones.
So, yeah, no, we did. I would say this Inside Show is for the tough questions, right? That's what it's for.
Hell yeah.
Because we need some time to talk through those. We don't want to be hurried. The Patch Note Show already has a lot of other information. So, like, the Inside Show is, like, the tough questions.
Shows them that we're listening.
It's also to throw in here that, like, what is said here isn't, like, hard set in stone. Like, if they say, like, oh, we're not going to get rid of executes, that might not 100% be true. They might actually, like, say that, but they're like, okay,
Yeah.
we've already kind of reworked
when they tell me that we're not doing Smite Card 2, that might not 100% be true.
Yeah.
So we get a lot of questions in this realm, and like the blanket high-level answer to think about is that we're going to handle and address these things as we encounter them.
Yeah.
So there are so many different things to think about from Smite 1 to Smite 2 that we don't have every answer to every small interaction figured out ahead of time. We have a high level design framework and goals and strategy that we're following to help us answer those questions and make decisions as we go. And we have a lot of individual specific examples of that we have specific data or feedback or an internal like desires for already, right? So these type of questions all fall into that category, in my opinion. So how do we plan on handling the balancing of beads or dia characters like Ares or Daji? Well, you're going to see when we port over our Ares or Daji, first of all.
Yep.
Right? Or when we port over a character with the execute. So, but I think the current structure we have in Smite 2 has a lot of the tools we need to do this. So first of all, everyone gets beads already.
Yeah, that's
which is
important.
helpful in some ways. Like the beads cooldown is longer because we were trying, and we nerfed CC durations in other ways. So like characters like Ares, where if you don't beads, you die, could be problems in this new setup, right? That's true. So we have God kit changes. So maybe Ares alt or Daji alt will change a little bit more to have maybe a more conditional CC instead of guaranteeing, a pull from across the whole map if you get hit with a single thing. Maybe they'll have some other sort of counter or check. We also do have other counters already exist in the game. There's an item in the game right now that is an AoE beads.
Talisman of Purification.
Yeah.
Very, very good.
Yeah.
Right? So you can already have 2 beads.
Yep.
On your character.
Yeah, 2 beads, and
On
one of
2
them gives
different
it to your
cooldowns.
entire team.
Or you could have a
around you.
teammate that is like,
Yeah.
if you trust them a lot, to cleanse you. So we have those tools. So we have individual god changes. In general, an individual god changes will always strive to maintain the god's identity, right? But we have active items that could adjust that, and then executes. We have Phoenix Amulet.
Yep.
Burst heals
True.
yourself,
Burst heals.
right? Maybe in a world without Aegis, we need to make shield health calculated into
the execute
the
health.
execute
Yeah,
health.
possible.
That would be a relatively easy change we could do if needed. So like, I think a lot of these things we have thought about.
Yes.
But we don't necessarily want to give any specific confirmation like ahead of time. But as these characters come out and as these items and things come out, then we can speak to them more.
Yep, it's totally one of those areas of like we have all these things that we are aware of are, almost like design opportunities that we can either be stifled by or grow from, and we want to make sure that we provide more opportunities, more player interactions, more player expression, as we've constantly have said in Smite 2, to allow you to enable and facilitate your gameplay for yourself or for your team, whether that's by god interactions, whether that's by map interactions, whether that's by item interactions. There's a lot that we can play with, and we're not going to be beholden by the rules and the necessitations of Smite 1 in Smite 2. There's a lot of things, like you said, the shield example is a great one. That's not exactly how it would work in Smite 1, but that's definitely something that we could play around with in Smite 2. That's definitely something that we can use as an opportunity and a learning and a growing waypoint from.
Maybe also there's just a active item that does have an Aegis sort of effect on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe that is something we'll need eventually.
Even
I
like
think
the Blood Forges and stuff like that, right? We've talked about how that helps you just have an on-demand shield, the Talisman of Namakas, and the
Right.
other things that just give you, now that you have active items, it just gives you these effects that you can do on demand. And that's not something that you need to have. Maybe there's going to be more passive items or stat sticks that can also help direct that too.
Yeah, chat is talking about how they actually like how executes counter shields by ignoring shields.
Sure, exactly.
Which is good, and that's probably
by
true.
intent.
But if executes became too powerful, then that
Yes.
could be a way to consider adjusting it.
If we're talking about that, then maybe we have some execute items, and that's not as opposed like, what if we take this argument the other way around,
So it's hard to answer all these until they're actually in context, right? But I think it's likely we'll get to some of these sooner than later. So you'll see. We'll see.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay. All right. No, I think it's a really solid question. I think it's one that the devs have already been thinking about. They've got to port over 130 some odd characters that they're bringing over from Smite 1 into Smite 2, and so there's going to be a lot to think about. But you don't want to think too far in the future because you still have to work on what's coming forward with it.
Yeah.
Still thinking ahead, but work on what maybe the next like 3 or 4 gods at the time, as opposed to like what the next like 30 or 40 are going to be.
We've got to have those things in mind, but as we mentioned even on the Passion Notes show yesterday, we gave Loki back his cripple and his ulti just because we didn't even have the tech at the time when he was first added, right? There's some things that we just need to build a foundation for before we can like hypothesize 10 steps down the road.
Yeah, I mean you can't build a building without getting the foundation down first. So
Exactly.
gotta make sure you kind of get your feet settled. I can't think of what I was trying to say there. Gotta get settled in before you can really start to get the luxury items out there and kind of the luxury of each of the individual kits out there. And even still, like some of the changes that have been made from Smite 1 have also kind of made its way to Smite 2. You talk about the Odin one that popped in for his pulses, now sort of matches Smite 1 a little bit. So still taking at least a little bit of inspiration from its the previous title with. But again, in the cases here, like with Daji, with Ares, and later it would be like Thanatos, Achilles, Ao Kuang. I think those are the only 3 executes from Smite 1 that immediately have come on top of my head.
Yep.
Those are 3 very different and unique cases for each of them. You have, an AoE execute under the threshold. You have individual single target ones, and you have one that's only a single target. So things could even change on there, or maybe you keep it and there's not a super hard counter to that something later on down the road. But it's all things to keep in mind. But we can go ahead and get our next question now ready over from our friends over at Reddit, which is, will the team be exploring more unique forms of scaling, things like using percentages of health, physical magic protections, or speed, similar to how gods like Baka, Kujira, and Gilgamesh even scale in current Smite 1?
So yes, I'd say definitely. There are already a few examples of this in Smite 2. See if I can think of them. Like,
new kin size is off of health from items only, if I remember correctly, with some of its scaling.
That's similar to this, but like even on god abilities themselves, Bellona's block damage, reflect damage scales off of protections.
Right.
Okay.
We do have some protection scaling and health scaling already in Smite 2, and then we also have, we've been using int on gods who don't traditionally use int as a way to scale unique utilities and things. So like, I think the answer to this is yes, definitely. We're already experimenting it with it a little bit. It's probably likely to see us continue doing more of it.
Yep. We had some more in mind, but I don't think there's anything that we've talked about. So I'm just gonna.
I'm trying to think.
I have
There's
some couple of
definitely
things.
some more in the game right now, but I'm like struggling to come up with them all off the top of my head. If we had Pon at our battle station, we could check a few. But
Quick, Pon, jump in.
Intelligence is definitely the way we're using. Like a lot of things that normally wouldn't scale are actually scaling now off of a stat. But then we also do so in the new engine, the new tool set, the way we have set up, it's very easy for a designer to choose an ability or an effect to scale off of any stat.
Yeah.
It's really easy to do from the development side. The challenge is on the design side, because you start to get some weird like circular logic about like, if I'm building more protections to deal more damage, then I'm building more damage to get more protections. You get some weird issues.
Yeah, we want to be
sometimes.
purposeful about it. Like,
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's very easy to just kind of be diluted in your effect.
But we certainly have some ideas for this in the future.
Yeah. Always something to keep in mind. Another one that comes to mind that got a bunch of very crazy scalings that kind of got thrown with it. Not crazy in a bad way, but just like it went from being very flat values in Smite 1 to having a little bit more purpose in Smite 2 was Kernanos with his change of seasons first ability that kind of pops in, where one part of it might scale off of strength, another part might scale off of int, so you have different ways you can kind of build it and really make it feel unique in that way. Chalk getting the rain based off of his intelligence a little bit kind of changes how his dynamic can play a little bit. So
Definitely.
Always things to keep in mind and things that are just going to keep being added through as Smite 2 goes down. So I think the short answer to this is yes, there will be more things. To what extreme and to what they scale off of, it will be determined as the design phase kind of goes on for itself more than anything.
Definitely expect to see this.
Yeah, we can go ahead and maybe load up our next question then if we got that one ready so we can move on, which obviously the emphasis right now is on Conquest, but how quickly can we expect to see shorter casual modes added similar to things like Arena or Assault? Now, I think we had Stu,
That's true.
CEO, actually put out a tweet just last night, a little bit later in the night, that kind of talked a little bit about that. I don't know if you guys want to dive a little bit more into it or not.
No, definitely go check out the Stu thread. He's been doing some articles on Twitter to describe a lot of different cycles of the, and philosophies around Smite 2 development. He did a discussion about Conquest versus other modes last night.
Yep.
Like, just to reiterate some of our high-level points, is like Smite is kind of fundamentally a multi-mode game. Even though the core MOBA mode is really important, having alternatives is also really important.
Absolutely.
So we can definitely say that other modes are in progress, in development.
Yeah.
But we're not giving any specific release dates or
not at
release timings or order of mode. I don't think. I don't want to drop any major spoilers here on the Inside Show.
No, but I know, like you in Stu's tweet, he was talking about that we've actively been working on Arena. It's something that that we've
so
tested.
that makes
it's something
sense.
that we know is important to Smite, as you said. We are as a multi-mode kind of game, and also there's just a lot of learning opportunities, right? And and just like Stu mentioned, in Arena, you're seeing a lot of condensed fights, a lot of moments happening a lot more rapidly than you'd see that in Conquest, and that's creating new opportunities to learn from, or to even put it clearly, some bugs and issues that we need to then remedy and fix, right? In a way, it's kind of just like a hyperbolic time chamber of what we need to do and how fast we need to do it for other features.
Yeah. So Arena's in progress. It'll be coming soon. TM. Can't say exactly which update, but it'll be on the way soon. And we are already thinking about what other modes we might want, how many we might want. which ones are we think most important to bring.
Which ones we
over,
want to put the gas pedal on?
Which ones we want to change entirely or not?
Yeah.
Is that a Smite Cart joke?
Well, I didn't say you did.
He's really trying to get that push, and he's Smite Cart fans out there. He's pushing for it.
But the most important thing to take
have
away
been for
from
years.
this discussion and Stu's main point in his thread was that it is really important that we focus on the core of the game.
Right.
So before you build out wide, you need to make sure you're,
The foundation.
we'll keep using the foundation.
Yeah, we're gonna
I
just
guess,
keep
but
using
it's like,
it. The core.
for when you're talking about
The
a
pillar is
video
strong.
game, you want your most competitive elements and your most time-consuming elements,
And that was a
your,
big part of what he
like
mentioned.
combat, and you also want something like with reasonable level of complexity. Like
Absolutely.
starting with Arena before Conquest would have had a lot of map, like AI objectives, laning, just a lot of that stuff just wouldn't have gotten done yet, I guess, or like in a different order, which
Yeah.
just didn't make sense.
We wouldn't have opportunities like this weekend tournament kind of, to arise. And we wanted to make sure that we had the high level foundations, we had the complexities ready.
Yeah. So like really the Conquest is, Smite is a MOBA. And Conquest is our competitive mode, and it is our most played mode by the players by any metric you want to use. So shout out to Innocent Rabbit for the clarifications recently on that. Conquest is the most played mode in Smite. It's the most popular mode, however you want to define that. And it is our one for our primary competitive sense. And it is the one that we needed to make, so therefore we needed to technically prepare for, so therefore it made the most sense to start with it.
Makes sense.
So
to
then
me.
outside of that, we definitely understand the desire for some alternative ways to play, and we'll plan to deliver those as soon as we can.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I think it's right to start with Conquest, the standard 5v5. If you look at almost any other MOBA out there, that is the standard mode of play that almost all of them really kind of push for. Some of those other games will have some alternative modes, but maybe not to the same degree that Smite 1 had. But starting with what Smite 1 even started with, you look back into the olden days of the alpha of Smite 1. It was a Conquest. Only
Classic Conquest.
It was
Did you
like
play the Classic Conquest recently, J-Mac?
Man, Classic Conquest was hard to go to after playing because I'm just sitting here going, where is any form of farm on this map? What do I even do? But it's
A lot of us fell in love with Smite on that Classic Conquest map, though, and look how far we've come, right?
Yeah, I think I joined in just after the week of open beta was when I first started Smite. It was the release of Chalk and the Kali remodel. Like those were like the first two things that happened for me playing Smite. So I missed out on playing on the Classic map. I was still playing like Classic Joust and things like that at the time, but like Conquest is truly the core of any MOBA out there. So
Person in Twitch chat says that 90% of our Smite streamers are Assault mains.
Oh, okay.
You have any data behind that? That sounds like a
90%.
wild.
Sorry,
that sounds
hold
like
on.
a wild.
What are you talking about? Just like here on
number,
the
but-
stream
On the
team.
Smite
Because
channel
if it's on the stream team, I don't think that's entirely accurate. Because I can think of quite a few who play more than just Assault. A lot of them are actually multi-mode players.
Yeah.
Some of them might just
That's
play.
what I'm-
Some of them might play Assault just while they're on the channel because they want to grind ranked or Conquest when they're on their own channels. I know that we have a few ranked players. Humu in the morning is one of our early grinders for casual and ranked Conquest.
I
know
think
that
when you're
Moth plays ranked as well.
All content creation,
Yeah, if we're talking-
ranked Conquest is by far the most viewed. People like
Yeah,
the
for sure.
competitive element and they like the stakes. I think then the more multi-mode casual view is somewhere in the middle, potentially even ranked duel, like dual dedicated streamers probably outpacing just like casual variety mode streamers even. I'd be interested
Yeah.
to see the actual data by hours streamed by multiplied by viewers or something by Smite game mode.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I know that Conquest for
Ranked
sure,
Conquest
whether
has
it
got to
be
be the number one.
whether it be like casual Conquest or ranked Conquest is definitely like one of the more viewed ones. You look at the top streamers that are out there, your Weekends, your Final Ks, Chris,
All the SPL
Inbound, all those.
players
Any
individually,
current,
right?
well, I can't say current, any recently current SPL or even
Yeah.
like former current, like with Weekend and Incomp throwing in there, they're slamming Conquest all the time, and those are the most viewed ones. Maybe that's because they've been able to kind of establish their brand and identity with that one.
Right.
But you do have some, some of the ones who will kind of sneak up there, being your arenas or your slashes, your assault players bumped up there. You have your duel and ranked joust players as well that kind of pop up there. You think of players like Rexy, Sanda Dude. At one point, Chris was also a primarily duel streamer, kind of moved over to Conquest. So there's a lot of interest, at least audience-wise, for Conquest, and I think that's
Right.
just comes naturally from being in a MOBA. People want to see Conquest. They want to see the main game mode. They want to learn how to play at the top level of play, so that way maybe they could get into what would have been at the time, being into the pro status or that semi-pro level of status as well. So starting with Conquest, which brings in the most viewership and has the most people playing and the most people interested in, just makes sense coming into Smite 2.
It does. I mean, I'm just trolling a little bit because chat is devolving into a little bit of individual mode mains getting defensive about their modes or talking about the downsides of other modes. And there is pros and cons to each
100%.
mode. That's okay.
Love playing Conquest, but I was on Smite 1 last weekend slamming those 3 a.m. assault queues, trying to get sniped by some sweaty nerds in chat that I can see right now. But
there was a time where I was known as a joust main.
Yeah.
Some of you might remember
Exactly.
back in the way old days. I've been maining Conquest for a long time ever since. And Assault was always one that my buddies and Slash and Clash and Siege, when I was just goof around with my buddies, we always played. So there's something for everyone. It's important to have something for everyone, but I think we've thoroughly explained why Conquest is first now.
I think so. So I think we can go ahead and get the next question ready to go so we can kind of move on at least beyond the Conquest. So I've mentioned for him, we are out of the pre-prepared questions, and now we can start maybe polling some of the questions.
Oh,
from
really?
chat, or
Already?
if you guys have anything that you didn't get a chance to talk about yesterday during the patch notes, because I know that those ones sometimes, even though they run long, it feels like you just still don't have enough time to kind of talk about. So we'll open up some questions to the chat, or if you guys want to maybe
just
start
to
with
reiterate
anything.
what Stu says as well as that, the most notable thing is that Smite players play multiple modes regularly. Like, that's just the thing. We're not a singular mode game. AJ said that too. We expect we're going to see a lot of different game modes.
We should have Max rerun this data, but there was an old study we did when we were trying to categorize players into mode main status and how many games do they have to play and like where do we draw the line, and it was like very hard to say this player is a Conquest main, because when we're just looking at the data, this is not the feedback, this is just what players are playing. A huge majority of Smite players played a lot of modes, and their modes were not all that significantly different in percentage. Like a Conquest main might have been like 45% of their games on Conquest, and if you took it up to like 55% of people, or 55% of your time only spent in Conquest, it was like only a handful of people. Because like even the SPL players, like I've run into SPL players in Arena,
100%.
and Clash, a lot over
Mm-hmm.
the years too. So even they are playing a lot of different stuff too. So it's like, it really is, when we're looking at the true data, people play multiple modes. I'm surprised we're already out of our pre-prepared questions. I was worried we were going a little long, but I'm glad we have some more time.
Well, I just want to troll and just be like, just reach towards it, and because everyone just keeps
It's
talking
just
about
taunting us right there. Like,
like-
everybody was slamming the button, putting a.
See, the problem
Somebody
is-
randomly added a button emote to Smite game because I just noticed that.
I
as
saw
well,
they've been
that
spamming
people
the
added.
button.
So that just got a little card, little shout
not
out.
pressure, not a pressure.
No, it's not quite enough. We need like somebody like come up there, like put a hand on it, but I can't move from the chair. Little y'all know,
I was joking about this, but like earlier, it's like, what if we just have someone hanging from the ceiling and just hover their way down to press it?
Because what Chad doesn't know is we're actually glued to these chairs. We can't leave until the show is over. Once the camera turns off, the glue like dissolves, and we're able to actually stand up. So we can't move any further than this.
If I start talking about item efficiency in our spreadsheets, Travis will come in early though to interrupt me.
That is true. Maybe
Because
we
he
just
doesn't want me to bore
get a big
anybody or
spreadsheet
educate
somewhere.
anybody.
Okay.
So we have a few questions coming in.
go
Let's
for
see.
it.
I see a few that I've seen a couple times, so I'll try to ask. I like this one here. How will your design philosophy change as esports becomes more involved in Smite 2 and new strategies develop? As I mentioned earlier, you definitely have to account for esports data and feedback in your balancing strategies.
Yes.
It is a huge component. If anything, what we've learned over 10 years of Smite 1 is that our community cares much more about the perception of characters and the popularity of characters. And if I try to tell you that Arachne is 75% win rate and always has been, and is one of the best gods in the game, everybody will just go, something's wrong with you, the way you're calculating that, right? And they're right to an extent, right? When you're averaging in everybody, that's not necessarily the best data. You maybe need to cull out the bronze games, which is reasonable to some extent. So as soon as we see, like, we're still in Smite 2 going to be doing a lot of, experimental gameplay implementation and balance, a lot of stuff that we already wanted to do on the dev side, but we're definitely going to have to reassemble the process for looking at our SPL data, what's top pick, what's top ban, what items are, overtaking in multiple roles, things like that, and definitely start making changes to account for it. I'd say we're planning to use a lot of the same methodologies we had on Smite 1.
Yep. We totally had a look at, like you said, what the esports is going on at all the different levels, comparing that to the high-level ranked scene, the low-level ranked scene, high-level conquest that wasn't ranked, the perception and the popularity and the win rates of all these different characters. It's all different factors to keep in mind of. But with Smite 2, we need to also weigh, for example, this weekend's tournament with what our goals and what we might expect for changes that are already coming in to the next Alpha Weekend test as well. There's a lot more to be considering of, like, there's a lot more future projection, and we may make some changes even based off of this weekend, like potentially. That doesn't mean we're going to just be driven and only focused on that too. We have a lot of our own high level goals that we want to try and play around with as well.
One question I saw pop up, which might be a little bit of an easy one, which is, of the gods that we've released so far, because obviously I'm not going to ask you guys to spoil any kind of challenges for future upcoming gods, but of the gods released so far, what's maybe been one of the more challenging ones, whether that be just to get them actually up and running, or to figure out what kind of changes have had to be made so far for those gods?
Let's see. I mean, so the challenge that we're having right now is we're all working on many gods who are not out
like
yet.
the one that I'm
So we're having to take a
now.
lot of time to carefully pick what we talk about here.
Just of the 14, that's what I'm saying. It's just of the 14 out right now, which has been the hardest of those ones to kind of get over into Smite 1 and kind of get them going through. So
Pon worked on most of those because he was started the earliest on Smite 2, while Clumsy and I were still on Smite 1. So he would be the best equipped to answer this question.
There's just a lot of different things. Like anytime that we create new tech that needs to come in and feel solid, like even when Fenrir came in, right? There's a lot of things between like the brutalize, the tweens, the ulti tech coming in. Funnily enough, the scaling wasn't too much of a problem. Pon kind of went in and like even brought that into Avatar's Parashu and Dreamer's Idol, because that one was a fun one to play around with. But anytime that we have to create something from fresh, like even whether it's the cripple tech or not going to name things that aren't out yet, but yeah, just anytime that there's something new, fundamentally different that we need to play around with.
So there's a couple of ways you can answer this question. So just things that require completely new, like true engineering level programming are a challenge. Those are things that, our team is not fully equipped to implement on our own. So that has their own unique challenge. Some gods are a challenge that have just a huge variety of things. So they're just a lot of work.
Right.
To go through everything and do everything. If they have more than 4 abilities, if they have multiple phases or stances, that type of thing. So that's not really as much challenging as it is just time consuming. And then probably the most interesting one is like getting the visuals to look and feel really good and sync up with the gameplay.
Absolutely.
Is a significant effort. And it is something that the design team actually does a lot of. Like, we are working on the way we implement an ability can be more or less conducive to triggering a particle effect or an animation at the correct time, syncing things up and by frame.
Yes.
That's probably the biggest challenge that we've done so far on the whole
every
game.
god.
Yeah, and that's on every god.
Yep.
So that's probably how I would answer that question. Like, just getting, Pon and Josh, our gameplay engineer lead, spent a lot of time and effort working through all that stuff. And it's still something we're working on constantly, and it's very challenging.
There's a lot of moments that, and like Smite 1 has been in development for such a long time, right? And there's so many things that we are rediscovering that was almost necessary in Smite 2. It's like, the way gravity worked or something like that, like the way these interactions work, the way the animation server and client agree or disagree on just, visual effects, as AJ was saying as well. There's a lot of moments that we have to recreate and relearn, because not all of us were there from literally day one of Smite as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a couple of questions that are like straight up calling me out, and I don't. I want to answer those, but I don't want to give in to those. So it's like DLSS FSR, like someone saying we're dodging that question. We already answered that question. Like, those are
Gotcha.
graphical technologies.
Mm-hmm.
We are already actively investigating those. They're not ready yet, but those are things we're looking into. So you don't have to be so upset about that, my friend. We already answered it.
I think that was one of the Reddit questions that had already kind of gotten a little bit of an answer, but it's not much more than what's already kind of been spoken. I think it's very similar to a lot of the ranked questions that we're seeing constantly. Every single one is, when ranked, when coming ranked. It's just like, let's get the game out first, and then we'll eventually get towards ranked.
So the plan is to have ranked ready shortly after we go 24/7 playable.
Mm-hmm.
So
Nice.
We want the game to be 24/7 and playable and live and stable before we go turning it ranked on, right? Because that is just would be a really bad experience if that wasn't the case. I see a lot of people calling me out about Hecate. So the fun story, Hecate was delayed. We talked about that. We were intentional about that. One thing people don't often realize in the dev cycle is, like, at the time we're talking to you, the next release is like mostly done. Right. So if at the time we delayed Hecate, if we put her from Alpha 1 to Alpha 2, gives us like no time to do anything because it's like it's already Alpha 2 time.
Yeah.
Wait.
yeah.
I didn't even
notice.
see him. So anyway, Hecate.
was here the whole time.
If we said we needed more time to cook, and you want to see some real results from that cooking, it can't be the next update.
Yeah,
you need to move at least an additional one. This has kind of always been the case. This has happened a lot actually in Smite history, although mostly behind the scenes people don't notice. But if you make the decision late in an update cycle to slide to the next update cycle, you're not really buying yourself any time.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
you need to put it further down the pipeline to really plan to improve and change that thing.
I mean, I think I guess since she's already been released in Smite 1 kind of talk, like Mammon was a god that was supposed to be planned like a year prior to when she came out. And then things happen, stuff gets pushed back, and eventually she's got to go and sit back a little bit longer before she can, kind of get a little bit of extra development. And then eventually you get the god out there. So sometimes when you do want to take some time and really get the magic of that god really going, it's going to take maybe a little bit more time than anticipated. Plus, on top of that, as we've kind of been highlighting through, is there's a lot being worked on, not just, with how the game looks, how the game functions, but all the different gods that are being worked on currently, whether that be 4, 5, 6 different gods that are all in production at the same time. And you're also working on a new god, with Hecate and getting, kind of a rework with how her stuff is working. There's a lot of moving parts, and it's not like you can just spit out 6 gods, in a week or whatnot and say, all right, cool, here's our next update. By the way, here's an insane amount of content.
Yeah.
It's going to take a little bit of time because there's all these things going on with the entire development team. And it's not just so much of go back and say, okay, cool, we just changed this ability. That could be done by like one person. No, that's got to be done by the designers to figure out what to do, the programming team, if something changes with that, the
It's
FX
just
team.
the planning on top of that. So if you move something back, you already have a whole bunch of stuff that's going out in the next patch. You just slam this on top of it. That doesn't really benefit anyone.
Yeah.
So you have to actually put things a little further to give you time to actually plan around them and actually dedicate time to them. I'm seeing a lot of questions
I played
about
Hecate
ranked.
today, and Hecate was great. Like the changes that the community suggested, and man, it was a lot of fun. I can't wait
changes
to.
since they last saw her. So
Oh, yeah.
I'm excited to when we are ready to show that goddess. I'm excited.
Yeah, her new button is. I mean, her ultimate is like. It's pretty cool.
Spoilers.
So, but what I'm hearing is that this is not the same Hecate.
Travis, what
that
are you
we
doing
saw
here?
just
I'm
a
just
while
gonna
ago.
keep quiet. I'm just like,
Are you gonna come around and press the button, or are you just kind of hanging out for
he
a
actually
bit?
has a
He
spreadsheet.
can't reach. Unfortunately, he's fallen into the trap of now he's sat down and the glue has applied in his seat. So
Yeah.
now he can't come
Do
and
you
press
have an
the button.
announcement for our Insight viewers?
Let me pull up some spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hey, that's
This
my
is
job.
what Pawn does, yeah.
Yeah.
Or I could just go push the button.
You could. A lot of people in the chat want you to push the button.
Let me.
To answer Ace, because he's asking, I only have the Japanese Pantheon hat. That's the only one of the ball caps that I have. And I was so upset because we have some of the merch out there, and one of them was the Japanese Pantheon shirt.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But it was only in small, and I wear like a larger and XL. So I was so sad 'cause I'm like, I can't even wear that
He's
shirt.
gonna
'cause-
do it.
Oh, he's
It's like a Groundhog Day. We're just waiting to see what he does. Oh, with
with
the
the
foot.
foot.
That's it. The button's been pressed.
I guess
I mean,
he
the
pushed the
server's
button.
up?
You guys can go.
Does that mean
Y'all can go play
game
the
is
game.
live?
Can we go play the game?
I don't know. We have 12 more minutes. Should we answer questions or should we just go?
We could probably answer a couple more questions, fill a little bit of extra time. Kind of
go
look.
Travis just press the button and leave.
Look, here's the thing: is like they need a little time. The server's kicked on, but they need a little bit of time before it's actually like fully going. It's got to warm itself up. It's been a month since it's been
wanna
active,
go
so
play.
so you want to go play?
Well, no, it's fine. We can answer questions if there are any, but then I want to go play.
I think we all.
I gotta go
play.
work. But this counts as work, so this is fun. No, I wanted to say that I saw a lot of questions about ranked in general, systems around ranked, and we did already talk about that a lot. I don't want to rehash all of it right now, but
I think
maybe we need to do a retweet.
Maybe
or let's
so,
go pull up Max's initial plans, what he's communicated out, or maybe I'm getting a little mixed up on what we've kept internal versus external yet. So
Yeah, I
we
think
will definitely have some communications we can prepare coming up, but I don't want to go ahead and I don't want to spoil anything unintentional or misspeak about it right now. But we are making significant changes to the way ranked is played, the way ranked is quantified, MMR and matchmaking behind the scenes, party rules. There's a lot of adjustments, and generally our goal is if there's something you disliked about the system in Smite 1, we are trying to make it better for Smite 2. So if you're like, I hate this thing about Smite 1 ranked, why don't you change it? We will almost certainly trying to change that in Smite 2.
Yep.
Some things are easier to change than others. Some things might have unintended effects if we change. But that is the general goal.
Yeah. So ranked is under the watch. We're keeping eyes on what we want to do with it, how we want to improve it, what changes are going to get made. I do believe it was the the insight at SWC where Max gave the most amount of at least public in depth about what ranked is.
That'd be the one you'd want to go check.
Yeah,
out.
so
That's the best thing to look at.
So we'll have to probably scroll further down. Maybe we just put like maybe I can go out and like find the video and just throw it up on like,
probably
Twitter or something
saved
like
as
that.
a standalone somewhere. SWC Smite 2 matchmaking.
Yeah, if you go to youtube.com/smite
What do we
game.
call those things? Panels? Maybe was it labeled as a panel?
Yeah, maybe it's a Smite 2 panel.
I don't know.
Or like a Smite 2 dev insight from SWC. If you go to youtube.com/smite game, scroll down all the way to like January, that would have been the third. Was that the third day or the second day that we did that one? I can't remember.
Let's watch it all.
Whether it be January like 12th to 14th, look for videos around that time, and you'll probably find the video there, and it'll give as much information as has been public, because I don't know how much more has been publicized. Otherwise,
I don't think so much.
Otherwise, look towards Innocent Rabbit on Twitter, because he's been putting out any information that he's either been gotten permission for or has kind of already done a little bit of in-depth on, just the stats guy in general. So if you have any kind of numbers, concerns to what's been popped out, he's probably had some kind of discussion. There was a little shout to him earlier for kind of talk about like the most played modes for Smite 1. That was Max to come in and kind of debunk a really old a really old statement that kind of stuck around for maybe too long. But is there any other questions you guys maybe see that?
I mean,
that
there's
kinda
a lot
spark your
coming
interest?
through. I'm just like not sure we want to dig into. If you're asking your question many times and we're not responding to it, maybe just understand that we don't know the answer or we can't answer.
Yep.
So
Or it's possible it's already
there's some
been
people.
answered.
If you're asking about future content, I might not be able to say it. If you're asking about a pretty specific feature and a specific control scheme or what platform, I might not know the answer right off the top of my head. My answer would be test it in the alpha test and let us know if it works or doesn't work. If something you really want doesn't work, put it in the feedback form or share it on social media. Let us know. We got a lot of that stuff like that. Was a really big focus on Alpha 2's launch, was fixing little settings that people really relied on a lot, and going through and adding those.
Or it's also a possibility that we may have already answered that question here on this show, or was answered just recently, at least yesterday in the update show as well. So make sure you're going back and rewatching this if need be. Go back and keep up to date on the update notes. Remember, those have already dropped as well for Alpha Weekend 2, which is actually now currently live. I can now officially say that it's not happening later today. It's already happened. Travis came
live.
in,
The
sat
button got
down,
pressed.
pressed the button. It's
Kicked the
done.
button.
So Smite 2 is live for you to go out there and start testing all the cool new stuff. Try out the two new gods that are out there, Hades and Soul, available for you to play. Give us your feedback on that.
New items.
And remember to constantly be providing the feedback. We have the survey that'll go out at the end of the alpha test, the survey that you can fill out to let us know what you liked, what you disliked. If you run into any bugs, you can go to smite2.com/bugs. That'll be a report survey that you can fill out there. If something encounters that just doesn't feel right or just doesn't look or sound right in the game, either it's possible that it might have already been tracked. I think we have the public Trello board as well that shows what we already know is going to be happening coming into this alpha test and what we've already kind of kept track. But
There's so many bugs being fixed. It's actually really time consuming to share them all with everyone.
Yeah.
With everyone, it's that's a significant cost. So not every bug fix is actually listed. There's a lot more than that. So.
AJ always has this dilemma. It's do I write all this stuff out or do I just get more stuff in the game? And just
Right. Yeah. So I could be making more gods instead of writing patch notes, but we have to do a little bit of both. Right. It's important.
yeah, just know with the bug fixes that were put on those are the big ones that were the most feedback brought towards our attention for bug fix. Those are the big ones that a lot of people were saying. But then there was also a lot of smaller ones. We're not going to say something like, oh, we changed a single damage point on a god that was, mistaken or something like that on ability, if it was something like that. So a lot of changes have happened here into Smite 2. Well, thank you so much, AJ and Clumsy, for joining here on the Dev Insight for Smite 2. Make sure that you guys go out there, get your Smite 2 clients updated because it is out live now, ready to play. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We hope to see you on the battleground. Made in Georgia.
super famous, number one desirable. I do what I want when I want and how I want it. Leave you with the one in, yeah, that's how I roll. I got change to throw, I don't care about no gold. Better, so much better, flipping incredible. Always on the show, so they know that I still got it. And I never feel sorry, yeah, to the world. This is me, I'm so royal. And you all wanna be round. Yeah, you all wanna be round. Round a champion, a champion. This is me, I still on it. Cause you all wanna be loved. Yeah, you all wanna be loved. But a champion, a champion. When I hear him come like my fuse and then ba-bum. Later, see you later, I'm about to blow this up. You can sing my song if you want, I know you want it. It's always kinda funny, yeah, cause I know I'm a superstar in the sky to lead you on. Haters gonna hate us, approve of how they love. They can bring me down, nah. They are jealous of me and my umbrella, yeah, they love me so. This is me, I'm so royal. And you all wanna be round. Yeah, you all wanna be round. Round a champion, a champion. This is me, I still on it. Cause you all wanna be loved. Yeah, you all wanna be loved. But a champion, yeah. All I wanna do is just say, you don't understand how I play. I am on my way to win you over and over, yeah. Oh, you can hear my voice in your head, and you wanna hear it again. So you play it over and over and over, yeah. Yeah. This is me, I'm so real, and you all wanna be round. Yeah, you all wanna be round. Round a champion.